Yes, I like this. These homes in New England, it's nice.
Yeah, we like it there too. And just a moment.
Are we rolling? Yes, we are. Okay. So, Professor Schroeder, thank you for receiving us in your very nice home in Göttingen. Uh, when you accepted to come back to the University of Göttingen as the chairman of the physics department,
Actually, just the director of one of the several physics institutes,
okay,
not all of physics.
the third physics
Yeah.
institute, what lecture did you choose?
Well, first of all, I simply took over the course of four lectures that my predecessor Erwin Meyer gave, namely one lecture course on acoustics, including speech and hearing in concert hall acoustics, one lecture course on electromagnetic waves, microwaves, and so forth, one lecture course on um, uh, signal transmission, and another fourth course, I don't remember. Oh, yes, electronics, transistors, and that kind of thing. Four different courses. Later, I introduced a course, several courses on new topics, namely a course on coherent optics, holograms, and lasers. And I introduced a course on a topic that had become very dear to me, namely computer graphics. So I gave lectures here at the university on computer graphics, the work I had done myself as one of the pioneers in computer graphics in 1962. And so these were the kinds of lectures I gave here.
Okay. But very fast, you are driven back to room acoustics with one of your students. Who was he? Do you remember? One of your first PhD.
Yeah, Gottlob, you know. Gottlob, and then Seebasser, who was also ready to do his PhD, and they participated in this project that was financed by the German Science Foundation, investigating 22 different concert halls
So
here.
what's the idea of this project? I mean, you have been performing objective measurements. What was the problem then?
Well, we did two things in these halls. We made objective measurements, like reverberation time, and we made subjective measurements by making recordings of the London Chamber Orchestra, playing them back and reproducing them here in our anechoic space, and having them evaluated for acoustic quality subjectively by many, many listeners. And this was a wonderful method. I had listened to concerts in Vienna in the Wiener Musikvereinsaal and in Berlin in the Berlin Philharmonic, and I knew they sounded different. But just how different is difficult to say. But with this method, we could reproduce the same piece of music, the Jupiter Symphony by Mozart, in Vienna and in Berlin. Just you sitting here in the anechoic chamber and switch Berlin, Vienna, Berlin, Vienna. That was only possible with this reproduction method.
And it must have been a very long work.
For the students, yes.
Okay.
Yes, thousands of judgments, which when were evaluated by methods of modern psychology called multi-dimensional scaling. In other words, we did not ask our listeners which hall sounds warmer or more brilliant or all these misleading questions. We simply gave them pairs of concert halls, like Berlin and Vienna, and asked them, which one do you prefer, A or B? Nothing else. They didn't know what they were listening to, A or B. And thousands of these A and B judgments we analyzed by multidimensional scaling, which then showed us, as I mentioned before, that the reason why modern concert halls sound so bad is The ceiling is too low, they're too fan shaped, there isn't enough acoustic energy from the sides, from the side walls.
Yes. When how, what how many words did you took out of this experiment, and what is your personal opinion on the number of the number of physical objective tools that we have to quantify an acoustic hall, and the number of words that were in this study? Do you think there is too many? Do you think it's easy to put some words on a? Do you think it's a good idea to try to find some words to put on a room? Okay,
No, I think it's a very bad idea to use words like Berlin, like warm, and all these things because they are not well defined. Um, um, as I said, we simply used preference tests where we didn't ask for any other verbal description. Of course, then if you ask me what physical parameters are important, well, reverberation time, which was known since the time of Sabine, around 1900. But we found this is the main finding that the interaural disparity, how different the two ear signals are, how, in layman's language, how stereophonic the sound is in a concert hall, as opposed to monophonic sound where everything is in front of you. How well are you immersed in uh, the music that is radiated from the stage? Do you only hear it coming from the front, or are you surrounded by the sound? We call this interaural disparity, or interaural correlation, and so forth, or interaural dissimilarity, and so forth. This measure for what a layperson might call the stereophonic, the three-dimensional sound quality. This is the most important thing we found.
okay. So you exposed this just few minutes ago that the main result is the low ceiling, the fan shape, and everything. And your solution was to add a diffusion
Yes,
system because we need the ceiling to
yes.
get off the rain. Okay, so how did you had this idea by listening the French mathematician? How did you came to testing this diffuser?
Well, as I said, we first had them uh, produced in metal, and we tested them with electromagnetic centimeter waves, also known as microwaves. And then once I could see that everything worked as predicted by the number theory, we then constructed these surfaces out of wood, for example, and put them on the walls of concert halls, lecture halls, churches, and even private living rooms. People used these, what they then later became known as Schroeder boxes, in their living rooms to diffuse the sound. So when one reporter asked a person who was using my number theoretic diffusers, well, what do you have there on the wall? Well, he said it's called a Schroeder box. And why is it called a Schroeder box? He said, I don't know. Everybody calls it a Schroeder box. Well, what does it do for you? And then he had a wonderful answer. It makes the wall disappear. In other words, instead of getting a flat, harsh reflection from the wall, he is getting a diffuse reflection. It makes the wall disappear, he said. Wonderful characterization of the effect of number theory on sound.
Yes, it's true. Did you try immediately different well, one dimension, two dimensions, different shapes and forms?
Well, there are very simple uh, two-dimensional generalizations of these surfaces that diffuse the sound not only laterally but up and down too. However, these two-dimensional surfaces which exist and which we tested, which we built and which we tested, have not been used much in practice. People are happy with diffusing the sound in one direction.
Was it possible to protect this invention? Actually, I mean, it's not easy to protect mathematical hmm? theory of.
Yeah, that's a very good question. And when I did this work, I already had 45 United States patents and maybe hundreds of foreign patents. Not, and so when I had this idea after the talk of André Weil, um, I never patented it. Why? I had already put a lot of work into patents for speech compression and so forth, and it's a lot of work, and I never patented. I published it. Later, I had lunch with one of my patent attorneys, and I said, didn't I make a mistake by never having it patented? These diffusing surfaces that everybody around the world is using now. And he said, no, it's okay. Why? Because for AT&T, a big company, it's really not such a big business, diffusing surfaces. I mean, speech compression, music compression, we are talking about billions of dollars. I mentioned the example of the MP3 and Microsoft and Alcatel-Lucent. We are talking about billions of dollars. Here we are talking about thousands or millions. Not important, patent-wise. So he said it's okay that we never have a patent on it.
Mm. And that makes you famous, also.
Yeah, I mean, there is one way. Either if it's very important, you get a patent, as I did in speech and so forth, or you publish it. The moment you publish it, nobody can invent it. You see, one of the main concerns of AT&T and every big company like IBM, like Alcatel and so forth, is that um, someone else will make a invention and then prevent you from using it. You invented it too, but you cannot use it because you don't have the patent and you didn't publish it. But once you have an invention, and if you don't want to bother with the patent, if you publish it, or to use the technical legal term, to put your invention into the public domain, then nobody can have a patent on it, nobody can prevent you from using it. So many inventions at Bell Laboratories, including these diffusing surfaces, we handled by putting them in the public domain, you understand?
Yes. An American Society RPG,
Yes,
who's yes run by Jose D'Antonio.
Peter
Yes,
D'Antonio.
Peter D'Antonio has been trying very much of solutions with using this Schroeder
Yes,
diffuser, putting a small one into some kind of fractal
yes.
shape. So, what do you think of this?
Well, of course, um, Peter D'Antonio wanted to add his own invention, and he came up with the idea of fractal diffusers, using my diffusers and adding a fractal element. And I think it's a good idea. And you can buy it from him. These, how do they call them, fractal diffusers? I forget, but yes,
Mhm.
it's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
And maybe he has a patent on it. I don't know.
Well, I'm not sure of that. Really, I don't know. Recently, there've been also. Oh, yes. Also, some people say that when you are using too many fractal and too many diffusers, you get to be into absorption instead of diffusion. Is it true?
Yes, people have found out that these diffusers absorb sound. Theoretically, they should not absorb sound, they should diffuse the sound. But in reality, people found out that they also absorb sound. And to tell the truth, I don't think anybody knows the answer. Is this absorption in the air? Is it because the diffusers are built out of wood or whatever that vibrates and absorbs sound? At this point, at least I do not know why these diffusing structures not only diffuse the sound but also absorb it. And if I was younger, I would ask some students to investigate this question. I believe the question is unanswered. I'm not sure, but I think it's unanswered.
Okay. So now to your favorite subject, your numerical theory, the theory of numbers that you are using. Where did you get this passion for numbers and enigmas?
Where did I get, or how did I become interested in number theory?
Yes.
I've always been interested in mathematics. When the boys played softball on the street, called Schlagball in German, and they came to our door and asked my mother, "Where's Manfred?" And she said, "He's up in his room pulling little roots." That was her expression of doing mathematics. I was sitting in my room and doing mathematics even as a child, yeah, while my buddies were playing softball on the street. So I was always interested in numbers. I was interested in the distribution of prime numbers, and even in my uh, second year at the university, I solved the basic law about the distribution of prime numbers, namely that the distance between successive prime numbers goes according to the logarithm of the number. I discovered that already in my first or second or third semester here as on the train, 4 hour train ride home. Uh, I Now, what I did was not a proof. Not even Gauss could prove this logarithmic law. It was proved much later by Adama in France and de la Vallée-Poussin in Belgium. 100 years later, after Gauss and Legendre in France discovered this logarithmic law, and they never proved it, but for 100 years. But in my train, I I didn't prove anything, of course, but I could convince myself, yes, the distance between from one prime to the next goes to the logarithm of the numbers. I give you one example. What is the average distance between successive prime numbers near 20? Well, the natural logarithm of 20 is 3. In other words, I convinced myself that the average distance between prime numbers around 20 should be 3. And this is in fact true, that three uh, primes near 20 are 17, 19, and 23. This distance 17 to 19 is 2, distance from 19 to 23 is 4, average distance 3. Already at 20, this law is approximately true.
Yes, but this is only one example.
Yeah,
So
yeah, but I convinced myself generally that this was true, and then when I checked it out, I didn't have a logarithm table with me, but I happened to know that the logarithm of 20 is 3.
have you been seeking the prime numbers manually, doing the list? This one, this one, this one, trying some to divide them
Uh,
to go by hand.
uh,
Make,
no, but in my mind, I considered the divisibility of integers, including those integers that are not divisible by other numbers, called prime numbers, and convinced myself that they should become rarer and rarer and rarer, that their distance should increase like the logarithm. And Gauss, of course, convinced himself, and Legendre too, by actually looking at large numbers of primes uh, and then seeing this logarithmic law. And in other words, Gauss and Legendre had much more evidence, uh, while, as I said, neither they nor I had any mathematical proofs, but I simply trusted my. And I was lucky I was right.
when did you start writing this famous book?
When I
No.
started writing this book, or
Mm-hmm.
Um, well, one of my friends at Bell Laboratories always said, Manfred, you have to write books here. But I found it difficult to write. Now it's one of my greatest joys to write. But then I found it difficult. Then, well, what should I write? I would write a book about the subject I like best then and now, number theory. So I told my boss, John Pierce at Bell Laboratories, I'm going to write a book and I will call it Number Theory for Everyone, a popular book on number theory. And John Pierce, who was very acerbic in his comments, he said, Manfred, why don't you call your book Number Theory for No One? But then I was actually called it Number Theory in Science and Communication. And one of the greatest accolades, this was a very successful book, but one of the greatest accolades I ever got on this book was on a web page by one Christine Lehrmann in America, but originally from Russia, I think, who wrote in a web page, if I had to take one book to the coffee shop or to the beach on a weekend, what books would I take? And she lists as the first book Schroeder's Number Theory book. And she also wrote, as a student, I was never interested in mathematics, but Schroeder's book made it so interesting to me, I would now take the book on a weekend or to a coffee shop. I thought that was just a marvelous comment. She also wrote, the only thing I don't like about Schroeder's book is the corny jokes. Then I wrote to her, email, tell me what jokes are corny in my book and I will change them. Then she wrote back, no, there are no corny jokes.
When was the first edition released?
In 1985, and I convinced Springer it would have been typically $50, if I remember correctly, and I convinced Springer to offer it for much less money. I said it will be a successful book, and the cheaper it is, the more people will buy it. And I said, let's sell it for under $20. And they said, no, we can't do this. But they did sell it for $25. And then there was a very good review by the famous American physicist Philip Morrison in the Scientific American, saying how much he liked the book. And now a professional theoretical physicist is writing, participant in the Manhattan Project, Philip Morrison. And it was, I bought the book, this was during a meeting in Tampa, Florida, and before going to sleep, I wanted to read a little bit, so I got a copy of the Scientific American, and I made the big mistake of finding this review there, this very positive review, and it got me so excited. I couldn't sleep all night. The next morning, I called Heidelberg, Springer publisher. I said, print another 2,000 copies, which they did, and it became a very successful book.
So how many copies did you sell until
I forget, but there are now 4 editions and 10 or more printings, and many 10,000s of books, I think, were sold, which is quite a number, no puns intended, quite a large number for a book on number theory.
Yes, it's true. Okay then. Well, I have another question, but I can't remember it.
Okay, we
Okay.
can take a short cut because I have to change the